She traded stability for muscles. Now they're drowning in debt. The first time I saw Madison, she was laughing at something I said without even knowing who I was. It was a rooftop party, corporate mixer, downtown, one of those overpriced wine and cheese situations where everyone's pretending to love their job and hiding their name tags in jacket pockets. I just made some sarcastic comment about the dry hummus and the DJ playing 2012 hits like it was a time capsule, and she let out this loud, unfiltered laugh from across the patio. Blonde bob, athletic tank top under a blazer, legs like she could outrun a bike messenger. She turned to her friend and whispered something. I still locked on me. I was mid-conversation with a client, but that laugh landed like a direct hit. That's how it started. Not with a pickup line or some swiped right app intro. Just a shared moment over bad appetizers. Her name was Madison, and she was the kind of woman you notice twice. Once because she's undeniably pretty, and again because of the energy she carries. She had these sharp, ocean blue eyes that made everything you said feel like it mattered. We talked for 45 minutes straight that night, standing next to a table of untouched sliders. She told me she worked in wellness coaching, part-time sports physio, and was getting certified in something called hybrid mobility work, a phrase I pretended to understand. I told her I worked in risk analysis for private wealth management, which she immediately labeled as high-functioning paranoia with a penchant. I laughed. I liked that she had bite. She liked that I didn't try to impress her. The next day, she texted me first. It moved fast after that. I was 33, steady job, good savings, no wild exes in my wake. She was 29, independent, health-obsessed, and had a golden retriever named Cash, who hated most men but immediately liked me. She said that meant something. We dated 6 months before moving in together. A year later, we got married at a vineyard upstate. Small ceremony, just friends and family. Her dad walked her down the aisle and whispered something in her ear right before handing her off. She teared up, and I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. Living with Madison was like sharing space with a storm that cleaned up after itself. She was always in motion, running, lifting, cooking new macro-friendly meals, switching supplements every few weeks because gut health is evolving. I was more of a routine guy. Suit up, crush spreadsheets, pour 2-finger whiskey, rinse and repeat. She brought chaos into my symmetry, and at first, I loved that. She'd wake me up at 6 a.m. to just stretch together before work. She'd leave sticky notes with protein smoothie recipes on my coffee mug. She got me into hiking, Sunday farmers markets, and once even convinced me to try a hot yoga class, which nearly ended our marriage. We balanced each other. Where I planned 5 years ahead, she lived for Tuesday. Where I worried about taxes, she worried about hydration. And it worked. We didn't argue often. When we did, it was usually about time. My job had me glued to my phone. Hers made her more spontaneous. There'd be nights when I was neck-deep in numbers while she was dancing in the kitchen to Lizzo with a sweet potato in one hand and a resistance band in the other. Sometimes I resented her freedom. Sometimes she resented my structure. But we'd talk it out. Laugh about it. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. Or so I thought. She was always passionate about fitness. She didn't just work out, she trained. She studied form, corrected strangers at the gym, tracked her PRs like stock portfolios. I used to call her my Amazonian accountant. I never felt insecure about it. That was her world. I had mine. I respected her discipline. In fact, I admired it. She told me once that fitness gave her control when the rest of life felt unstable, and knowing her childhood, I understood that. Her mom had been in and out of the picture, and her dad raised her mostly solo, juggling jobs and bouncing between houses. So when she found something she could shape and own, like her body, she clung to it. And I never wanted to be the guy who got in the way of that. We had a good rhythm. I covered most of the finances. She handled the household, the dogs, and ran part-time online coaching for women trying to rebuild post-injury. We talked about starting a family someday, though we weren't in a rush. We wanted to travel more first. Hit Japan, hike the Dolomites, maybe rent a van, and do a no-plan road trip across Canada. We were dreamers with structure. Realistic romantics. Friends called us the stable ones. They said it with a hint of envy. That kind of quiet, durable love that didn't need big displays or constant affirmations. I really thought we were bulletproof. There were little things I cherished. The way she'd make that almost sneeze face before sneezing. How she'd sit crisscross on the couch to eat dinner. The weird way she hummed while folding laundry like she was performing for a crowd of towels. I knew every freckle on her shoulder, every curve of her spine when she curled into me at night. That kind of intimacy doesn't come fast. It's built. Over shared Netflix queues and canceled brunches and stomach bugs and birthdays spent at the DMV. We had that. And maybe that's why I didn't see it coming. Because when someone becomes your normal, you stop scanning for signs of collapse. You trust. You assume the center will hold because it always has. I didn't think Madison could lie to me, not deeply. She'd always been the radical honesty type, blunt to a fault. She once told my sister her lasagna tasted like regret. So no, I never thought she could hide something. Not from me. We were 6 years into our marriage when Madison told me she was finally going to get serious about one-on-one training, and honestly, I didn't think twice about it. If anything, I was surprised she hadn't done it earlier. Working out wasn't just a hobby for her, it was her second language. Since the day we met, she was always moving, always setting some new physical challenge for herself, always chasing better. Fitness was part of her DNA. In fact, one of the things that first drew me to her was how confidently she moved, like she didn't just live in her body, she commanded it. When we started dating, I remember weekends where I'd wake up at 9 and she'd already be back from a 5-mile run, stretching on the patio, drinking something green and terrifying that she swore tasted great. She never pushed me to join her, never made me feel bad for skipping workouts, and I respected her all the more for that. She had her world, I had mine, and we met in the middle. She never needed anyone to motivate her, so when she said she wanted to level up her training and start seeing someone named Zane at a boutique gym across town, I saw it as a healthy progression. She told me the place was known for high-level performance coaching, recovery science, and that it was owned by a former Olympic athlete. I didn't ask for details, I trusted her. That's the key word here. Trust. At that point in our marriage, it wasn't even a question. She was my partner. We had our routines, our shared goals, our inside jokes. She still sent me selfies from the gym with sweat dripping down her temple and those playful captions like, "Your wife's turning into a weapon." I'd heart it, send a fire emoji back, and go back to whatever spreadsheet or client call I was buried under. See, my world was numbers. By then, I'd built a solid career in private equity risk management. I handled high-net-worth portfolios, long-term forecasting, and specialized in identifying vulnerabilities in seemingly stable investments. I worked for a firm that catered to the top 5%, clients who flew private but still asked about marginal tax rates. My day-to-day was filled with market stress testing, litigation risk profiles, asset rebalancing strategies, stuff that makes most people's eyes glaze over but kept me sharp. It wasn't sexy work, but it paid well, and more importantly, it gave us options. The house, the savings, the freedom for Madison to follow her passions without worrying about bills, that all came from years of me putting my head down and playing the long game. Madison used to joke that she married the tortoise in the race, slow and steady but always ahead by the end. I wore that like a badge. She loved that I was grounded. She'd tell her friends, "He's the guy you want around when things go sideways." But she was the opposite. Restless. Dynamic. She needed motion to feel alive. She was always signing up for a new class, Pilates, Krav Maga, underwater yoga, whatever trend was sweeping through the city, and she had this knack for sticking with it just long enough to conquer it before moving on. And I was always her cheerleader. So when she said Zane was pushing her harder than anyone ever had, I applauded it. She said he had a background in competitive athletics, military discipline, and a reputation for results. I remember her casually mentioning he used to work with elite clients, people training for marathons or obstacle races. I thought, good. She deserves the best. She started seeing him 2 days a week. Then it became 3. She started following a new nutrition plan. Her supplements changed. Her sleep schedule shifted. She started saying things like, "Zane says I should be timing my macros tighter," or "Zane thinks I've got more potential in my posterior chain." And even then, I didn't blink. That's how Madison talked. With passion. With detail. With obsession. It wasn't out of character. If anything, I admired it. I figured I'd support her journey the way she supported mine. I paid for the sessions without hesitation. I even helped her build a new spreadsheet to track her lifting progress, because that was my love language, structure. But the more I supported, the less I felt involved. The gym became her temple, and Zane became its priest. I'd ask how her session went, and I'd get vague responses like, "It was killer," or "We're pushing volume this week." When I asked if I could stop by the gym sometime, just to check it out, she shrugged and said it wasn't really a guest-friendly setup. High-performance environment, no distractions, she said. I let it go. I didn't want to be controlling. I was proud of her for taking herself seriously. And besides, I had my own battles. My firm had just brought in a new executive director who was pushing insane productivity metrics, which meant longer hours, more client reports, and barely enough time to catch my breath. There were nights I didn't get home until after 10, and by then she was already asleep or still at the gym for a late stretch session. Our communication thinned, but again, I rationalized it. We were both busy. We had goals. We were building towards something. But underneath that logic, there was a quiet shift I couldn't name. It was in the way she stopped asking about my day. The way she started getting dressed up for workouts, new leggings, new sports bras, hair done just so. I remember catching her once spraying perfume before a gym session. I laughed and said, "You trying to seduce the elliptical?" She smirked and said, "Just makes me feel good." At the time, I smiled. But something lodged in my chest and stayed there. She started taking longer to get home. She'd say the gym was packed, or that she stayed to foam roll, or that she was getting a smoothie. Sometimes she didn't answer my texts until an hour later with a casual, "Just finished up, heading home soon." I never pressed. I didn't want to be that guy, paranoid and insecure. That wasn't me. I was the calm one, the stable one. The man she once said made everything feel safe. But I was starting to feel like a bystander in my own marriage. Zane became a name I heard more often than I heard my own. Zane says I'm not eating enough. Zane thinks I should enter a Spartan race. Zane thinks I'm holding too much tension in my traps. It was like she had a new co-author writing the script of her life, and I wasn't even on the page. Still, I swallowed my pride. I believed this was a phase, that maybe I needed to be more present, that maybe this was her version of growth, and I had to grow with her or get left behind. I never once considered she might be lying to me. That trust, that foundational blind belief in the person you've built a life with, it's a strange thing. You never realize how dangerous it is until you see what it's allowed to sneak past you. I didn't see the danger then, not even when it was staring me in the face. All I saw was a woman I loved becoming someone I didn't quite recognize. And I kept telling myself it was temporary, that if I just kept being stable, she'd come back home to that. To me. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped believing her, but I remember the first night I stared at the door, waiting for it to open, and it didn't. She'd said her training ran late because Zane was testing her endurance with a new circuit. Said the gym was slammed, they had to wait for equipment, finish late, nothing unusual. I'd just gotten home myself, burned out from another day of putting out client fires and calculating risk curves that kept shifting with every new market report. I warmed up leftovers, poured myself a drink, and waited. An hour passed. Then two. The silence of the house felt unfamiliar. It wasn't the absence of noise, it was the absence of her. When she finally walked through the door close to 10:30, her face was flushed, hair tied back tighter than usual, tank top sticking to her skin like she'd just run through a car wash. She said she'd stayed after to help Zane reorganize equipment, that they were prepping for a charity event. I nodded, said nothing. The lie didn't fully register, it just hung there, unconfirmed, unchallenged. But something in my gut twisted for the first time. After that night, her late sessions became more frequent. Mondays, Wednesdays, Saturdays. She always had a reason. Traffic, post-workout stretching, protein bar runs, deep tissue massage. I knew her schedule well, had known it for years, but now it kept shifting just enough to stay out of sync with mine. I'd come home, and she'd already be gone. Or I'd wait up, and she'd come back quiet, kiss me on the cheek, and head straight for the shower. Sometimes she wouldn't even eat dinner, said she was on a new intermittent fasting block, and didn't want to break it late. The distance grew like mold, subtle and slow, barely noticeable unless you were looking right at it. And I wasn't, not at first. I was distracted with work, focused on closing out a big client quarter, chasing projections, analyzing investor behavior. Every now and then I'd look up and wonder why it felt like I was living alone in a home built for two. Her phone changed too. It used to sit face up on the kitchen counter while she meal prepped or folded laundry. Now it was always nearby, face down, screen locked tight. She never left it unattended. I tested it once, asked if I could use it to look something up when mine was across the room. Her smile faltered just a beat too long before she handed it over. I typed in the address, thanked her, and gave it back, but I noticed how fast she took it once I was done, how she checked the screen the moment it was back in her hands. Maybe I'm paranoid, I told myself. Maybe she's just being cautious. Everyone's protective of their phones these days, right? But that voice, the one I always trusted in business, the one that flagged bad deals before anyone else could see the patterns, that voice had started whispering. And it wasn't going away. The physical changes were easier to track. She was leaner, sure, but it wasn't just her body, it was her attention. She stopped asking me how I slept, stopped commenting on my suits or noticing when I was gone for hours. When I left early for work meetings, she didn't say be safe. When I got home, she didn't ask how it went. We used to talk in bed, scrolling through stupid memes or dreaming out loud about vacations we hadn't taken yet. Now she fell asleep facing away from me, earbuds in, body turned like I was a stranger she didn't want to touch by accident. I knew she was drifting, but I couldn't prove why. I had no evidence. Just a feeling. And then came the day I made a mistake I wouldn't usually make. I got off work 2 hours early. An executive dinner got canceled last minute, and instead of heading home right away, I decided to surprise her. Maybe we go out for dinner. Maybe I could shake this feeling that was starting to feel less like paranoia and more like inevitability. I texted her to see where she was. No response. Figured she was mid-set. I drove to her gym. I'd never actually been inside, but I knew where it was, tucked between a wine bar and a high-end cycling studio. Sleek black exterior with frosted glass windows and one of those minimalist logos that didn't tell you much. I parked across the street and waited a minute. Just watched. No big deal. I wasn't there to catch her. I told myself that again and again. I just wanted to say hi. Just wanted to see her in her element. The front window had one exposed panel, probably for visibility to attract new clients. Through the glass, I could make out the silhouettes of 2 people near the free weight section. It was her. That was clear from the stance, tall, confident, legs slightly apart, hands on her hips like she always stood after a tough lift. And him, Zane, I assumed, standing just in front of her, too close. Not spotting, not coaching, just standing, watching her like he owned her. She laughed at something he said and then, without hesitation, he leaned in and kissed her. Not a friendly kiss. Not a joke or a thank you or a goodbye. A long, slow kiss like they'd done it 100 times before. Her hand went to the back of his neck. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't resisting. My breath stopped. It was one of those surreal moments where your brain can't quite catch up to what your eyes are reporting. I didn't react. I didn't throw the car door open or scream or march across the street. I just sat there, frozen, watching the kind of moment that doesn't belong to a wife and her trainer. When they finally pulled apart, she adjusted her waistband, said something, and he nodded. A few minutes later, they disappeared into a hallway, maybe locker rooms, maybe an office. I don't know. I didn't follow. Not yet. I just sat there, hard hammering, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. That was the moment the whisper in my gut turned into a roar. The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. Every late night. Every vague excuse. Every strange glance at her phone. It wasn't in my head. It had been real the entire time. And now I had seen it with my own eyes. I didn't confront her that night. I drove home like a ghost, sat in the dark kitchen, and tried to decide what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that I hadn't trusted myself sooner. She came home around 10 again, looking freshly showered, hair wet, hoodie slung low over her eyes. She kissed me on the cheek like she always did and went to bed. I watched her walk away and something inside me hardened. Not just anger. Not just sadness. Something colder. Something strategic. I was going to follow them. And this time, I wasn't going to blink. The night I saw them kiss through the gym window, something inside me shifted and never came back. I didn't react at the time, didn't slam the steering wheel or storm across the street. I just sat there in the car, heart pounding so hard it hurt, staring at my wife with another man's mouth on hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. I watched her smile afterward, touch his face like they were in a movie, then disappear with him into the back of the gym. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I already knew. The damage was done. But the rage didn't hit me all at once. It came cold, slow, methodical. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want the truth to come from confrontation. I wanted it from proof. I wanted certainty. I didn't want to ask questions she'd lie through. I didn't want half confessions wrapped in tears and apologies. I wanted to know everything for myself on my terms. So I started watching her. That night when she got home, I was already in bed pretending to sleep. She came in quiet, like always, set her gym bag down, showered, slipped into bed, and didn't say a word. Her breathing slowed within minutes. She was out cold. Meanwhile, I lay there staring at the ceiling, mapping every detail of what I'd seen and trying to decide what came next. The next morning, she acted normal. Told me she had a stretch session with Zane after her standard circuit. I nodded like it was nothing. Told her I'd be busy all day at work and might get home late. She said okay, kissed my cheek, and left. I gave her 10 minutes, grabbed my keys, and followed her in my car. I stayed back, careful not to get too close, watched her weave through traffic like she always did. She pulled into the gym parking lot. Same as usual. She went inside without looking back. I waited. She didn't reappear for 2 hours. I watched people come and go, some of them regulars by the looks of it, but she didn't leave. Around noon, she came back out with Zane. They weren't holding hands or kissing this time, just laughing, walking close, and when they reached her car, he leaned in through the driver's window for way too long. Then he stepped back and watched her drive away. She turned the corner, and he went back inside. That was day 1. Day 2, she told me she had errands to run after training. I nodded again, stayed casual, and let her go first. I followed a few minutes later and parked across from the gym again. This time she left less than an hour after arriving. No workout clothes. Hair barely messed up. She got into her car and didn't drive home. She took a winding route through a quieter part of town and parked outside a small apartment complex I didn't recognize. She sat there for a few minutes, then Zane pulled up in his own car, parked beside hers, and they walked inside together. I waited. 40 minutes. An hour. 90 minutes. She came out first. Alone. Checked her phone. Got back in her car and left. He came out 5 minutes later. They didn't return to the gym. She got home around the same time I did, claimed she stayed late to help clean up after a broken squat rack. I asked no questions. Just nodded again and made a mental note of the building number. Day 3, I followed her again. She went to a smoothie bar after the gym. I parked far enough away not to be seen but close enough to watch. She and Zane sat at a back table. No touching this time, but the way they looked at each other said more than enough. She leaned in every time he spoke. He touched her hand when he laughed. At one point, she wiped something off his lip and kept her hand there a second too long. After they finished, she left alone. This time, he didn't follow. I stayed a few minutes longer just to be sure. That night she didn't come home until 10. Claimed she went on a walk after training to clear her head. I didn't even respond this time. I just poured myself a drink and pretended to be half asleep on the couch. Day 4, I followed her without waiting. I told her I had a lunch meeting and left before she did. I parked outside the apartment building she'd been to earlier that week and waited. Sure enough, she pulled in around 11:30, same gym bag in the back seat, same hair tied up tight. She didn't knock when she got to the door. She used a key. Stayed inside for 2.5 hours. I didn't move the entire time. I didn't need to see what happened through the walls. I already knew. The key said everything. The routine said everything. And more than anything, the ease of it all, the comfort, the rhythm, they weren't new lovers sneaking around. They were a habit, a pattern, a full-blown relationship right under my nose. And I hadn't just missed it, I'd funded it, paid for it, encouraged it. I felt sick. The next day, I didn't follow her. I didn't need to anymore. I knew where she went. I knew what time. I knew how long she stayed. I knew where he lived. I even knew which window was his bedroom. I spent that entire evening going back through our shared calendar, matching up gym sessions with dates she canceled dinner, family events she skipped, holidays she claimed to be too tired to celebrate. Patterns emerged I hadn't seen before. Weeks where she went 5 days in a row. Long weekends when she said she was going on wellness retreats with friends. A self-care Sunday she took alone in January that now clearly wasn't spent alone at all. It all aligned. All of it. And the more I stared at the evidence, the more something else started forming inside me, not sadness, not even anger. Resolve. Cold, heavy, quiet resolve. She was planning her escape. I could feel it. The increased distance, the way she checked her phone during dinner, the way she started keeping her finances separate over the past few months. I was being phased out. She hadn't said it yet, but it was coming. She was preparing for a clean break, one where I looked like the unambitious, boring husband who worked too much while she found passion with someone who deadlifted more than I did. And maybe I could have confronted her. Maybe I could have walked in that night, thrown the evidence down, screamed, cried, asked her why. But I didn't want her answers. I didn't want her spin. I didn't want the lies. I wanted results. I wanted consequences. I wanted her to feel what it's like to have your life quietly taken out from under you without ever seeing the moment it all began. I knew I couldn't hurt her physically, and I wouldn't. But I could take away the thing she thought she'd secured. I could take away him. Not with fists or threats, but with reputation. With leverage. with the right call to the right person. And I already knew who that was. Because the gym where Zane worked, the one Madison thought was just a coincidence, that gym belonged to someone I knew. An old classmate, Dev. A guy who used to sit next to me in economics and laugh at the teacher's voice impressions. A guy I hadn't seen in over a decade, but who still popped up on LinkedIn once in a while. Someone who respected loyalty, who ran his business clean, who didn't like scandals. And if there's one thing I'd learned over the years, it's that reputations are easier to destroy than build. Especially when they involve a trainer sleeping with the wife of a married client. The groundwork was in place. I just had to make the call. And when I did, it wouldn't be for closure. It would be for justice. I waited 3 more days before making the call. I needed to be sure, not about her, not about him, but about the timing. Because if there's one thing years in my line of work teaches you, it's that poorly timed truth does more harm than silence. I needed leverage, clarity, and above all, control. Dev was my last piece. We hadn't spoken in years, old high school classmates, teammates on a mock trial squad that never quite won but always got under people's skin with how well prepared we were. He was smart then, and clearly still smart now, having built one of the most respected boutique gyms in the region. The place had a reputation for being clean, elite, and absolutely drama-free. Trainers wanted to work there. Influencers tagged it. Investors whispered about franchising it. I knew calling him could work in my favor, but I also knew I couldn't come in swinging like a jealous husband. I had to come in as a professional. So when he picked up, I played it straight. I said I needed help with something delicate, told him I believed one of his trainers was involved with my wife, and asked if he'd be willing to hear me out before jumping to conclusions. Dev didn't sound surprised. Not at the accusation, he sounded surprised to hear from me at all. But his tone was calm, serious. He asked a few questions, and when I told him the name, Zane, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "You free to meet tonight?" That night, we met at his gym after hours. He unlocked the front door himself, let me past the reception desk and into his office at the back, and closed the blinds before speaking. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're not the first person to bring me something off about Zane," he said. "But this is something else. You got proof?" I opened my laptop and showed him the dates, the photos I'd taken myself, the address she kept visiting, and a few short clips of her and Zane leaving together, taken from a distance but unmistakable. He didn't flinch. Just nodded slowly, then asked if I was sure I wanted to dig deeper. I told him I needed everything. I wanted to know if Zane had ever used the gym during off hours. If there were internal cameras that might confirm what I already suspected. Dev tapped his keyboard, pulled up a camera list, and quietly said, "Let's take a look." Most of the gym had blind spots, by design, to give clients privacy, but there were security feeds near the back hall, near the locker rooms, and in the stairwell to the office suite. We scrubbed through footage for the previous 2 weeks and found it faster than I expected. Madison and Zane, entering the building before dawn on a Saturday. The gym technically didn't open until 8. She used his access code. They moved past the main room and into the back. 20 minutes later, they emerged from the hall, clothes ruffled, hair out of place, laughing. No weights touched. No mats disturbed. Just them. The timestamp was enough. Dev sat back in his chair and exhaled. "This can't keep happening here," he said quietly. "You mind if I keep these?" I handed him a copy of the files on a USB. We didn't say much else that night. He didn't ask what I planned to do. I didn't ask how he planned to handle Zane. We both understood the rules of quiet power. The next day, I took my own steps. I contacted a few industry forums under an alias, dropped mentions about Zane's unprofessional conduct, supplied some vague but damning scenarios involving clients and potential legal liability. I sent anonymous complaints to 2 other gyms he'd once tried to get hired at, warning them to vet him properly. I spoke to a corporate gym chain's HR director, someone I'd met through Dev years ago at a fundraiser, and casually shared that there were whispers going around about one of Dev's trainers. I didn't even have to mention his name. She asked me outright, "Zane?" I said nothing. Just let the silence work. And it did. The wheels were already turning. Zane just didn't know it yet. Meanwhile, Madison kept up the act. She still kissed me goodbye, still came home late, still made protein muffins she barely ate. I watched her perform our marriage like a role she hadn't finished rehearsing, and I let her. Because the longer she stayed in that role, the more exposed she became. Dev texted me a few days later. Zane had been quietly suspended. Not fired yet. Not officially. But pulled off the schedule under the pretense of client reassignment. Word was spreading. He'd applied to another gym across town and been rejected without explanation. Someone had gotten to them first. I knew who, and I knew more would follow. I was methodical, precise, and untraceable. The same skills that made me valuable to investors were now the same tools I was using to dismantle the life my wife thought she was escaping into. But the final trigger didn't come from Zane. It came from her. One Thursday evening, just after dinner, Madison came into the room and stood by the doorway like she was about to ask me a question. But she didn't ask. She just said it, flat, simple, rehearsed. I think I want to separate. She didn't say the word divorce. She didn't cry. She didn't even try to soften it. She said she didn't feel fulfilled, that we'd grown apart, that she wasn't sure who she was anymore and needed space to figure it out. She said it like a therapist had helped her script it, like she was detaching herself from guilt by framing it as personal growth. I just nodded. Didn't ask why. Didn't mention the apartment. Didn't mention Zane. I looked her in the eye and said, if that's what you want. She looked confused, maybe even a little hurt that I didn't fight her on it. She mumbled something about moving her things out over the weekend and walked away. I stared at the place she'd been standing for a long time after she left the room. And that was it. The moment everything locked into place. No more watching. No more waiting. No more shadow work. Now it was time to act. Not with noise. Not with drama. With precision. She'd chosen her new life. It was time to show her exactly what it came with. She thought she was walking into a new life. That's what made it so satisfying. Madison spent that weekend boxing up her things in silence, moving with the robotic focus of someone who'd convinced themselves they were doing the brave thing, the mature thing. She didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't apologize. She just packed like a tenant ending a lease. I helped carry a few boxes down to her car. She thanked me without looking up. I nodded without speaking. She wore Zane's hoodie while loading the trunk, sleeves pushed back to her elbows like she was about to go build something real with the man she'd thrown everything away for. But by then, the walls were already closing in around them. Zane's name had already started to rot in the circles he needed most. Dev had quietly leaked footage to a few gym owners he trusted. No public scandal, just enough internal noise to raise eyebrows. A trainer caught engaging in physical relationships with married clients? Not worth the liability. Not worth the bad press. Not worth the risk. He was unofficially banned from 3 high-end locations within a week. Word got around that his references couldn't be confirmed. His interviews dried up. The gym he'd hoped to bounce to sent him a form rejection. Dev told me he was still technically on payroll but hadn't been given hours and days. He was starting to ask questions. Starting to get nervous. He must have assumed it was coincidence at first. Bad luck. Maybe someone jealous sabotaging him. But soon, reality crept in. Studio managers stopped returning his calls. Old contacts ghosted him. A rumor spread that he'd crossed a line with a client. No one said which one, just that it was enough to steer people away. His social media turned desperate. Posts about positivity, about starting over, about being misunderstood. He and Madison posted less. The photos they did share felt forced, filtered smiles, empty captions, matching smoothies and plastic cups. She had no idea yet. She thought she'd made it out clean, downgraded from the boring husband to the exciting trainer, left the spreadsheets behind for spontaneous Sunday hikes and passion on hardwood floors. But that honeymoon wore off fast when money got tight. Because Zane wasn't just being frozen out, he was bleeding income. Whatever side gigs he had vanished one by one. He tried to start an online coaching plan, but his engagement tanked. People asked questions. One account commented, "Didn't you get caught with a married client?" He deleted it, but not before it got screenshotted. She started picking up the slack, took on more clients in her coaching app, extended her hours, started dipping into her savings. I knew because I still had access to one of our old joint budgeting tools she forgot to log out of. The grocery list got cheaper. The workouts got shorter. Zane posted about having to humble yourself in seasons of challenge. A month in, he listed his car for sale. Meanwhile, I thrived. Quietly. Moved into a sleek downtown condo under a different name on the lease. Dev and I started meeting once a week, just 2 old friends talking business, fitness, and how reputations are currency. I didn't date right away, didn't post anything, didn't share. I wanted her to guess, to wonder, to stew. And eventually, she did. Madison texted me 2 months after she moved out. Short message. No punctuation. Just, can we talk? I didn't reply. She tried again the next day. I just want to explain. I let it sit unread. I watched her Instagram go dark for 2 weeks, then reactivate with a selfie of her in a yoga pose, captioned, reset. Her eyes looked tired. Her clothes less new. Then, finally, the message I'd been waiting for. I know what you did. I know you're the reason he can't work anywhere. It came at 2:13 a.m. I read it twice, then deleted it. The next morning, Dev called. Said Zane had come by the gym begging to be reinstated, claiming he was being targeted, that someone had it out for him. Dev let him rant, let him sweat, then handed him a termination letter with a clause stating any further action would result in legal consequences. Zane signed and left. That was the last time his name was mentioned in any gym I cared about. Madison tried one last time, 3 weeks later. Showed up outside my office. I saw her through the glass, smaller somehow, shoulders curled in, makeup too perfect like she was trying to recapture something she'd lost. My assistant came in and said, "There's a woman here asking to see you. Says it's personal." I looked at the hallway, saw her eyes meet mine, and shook my head. "Tell her I'm not available." She mouthed something. "Maybe, please." "Maybe. I'm sorry. I didn't care." She traded stability for muscles. Now she had neither. And the most brutal part? I didn't take her down with rage. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just let her new life collapse under the weight of its own illusion. I watched it fall, piece by piece, until she realized the foundation she thought was passion was nothing but sand. She wanted chaos. She got it. I gave her everything she asked for. Now she gets to live with it. Me? I sleep just fine. What's worse, being betrayed, or watching your betrayer slowly lose everything?